Have you ever stopped to think that the miracles in the Bible may contain a scientific logic without losing their divine touch? What if the wonders attributed to God were, in fact, manifestations of the natural laws He Himself created? Parting the Red Sea, multiplying loaves, healing the blind, could they be just supernatural events, or actions of a God who also masters the science He created? This text invites you to dive into one of the greatest mysteries of sacred history, the mystery of the Red Sea, how God used science to part the sea. Get ready to explore how faith and science can walk hand in hand, revealing the incomprehensible power of a Creator who operates within and beyond the laws of nature. Before there was time, space, or matter, there was God. In His infinite wisdom, He began the creation of the universe with a simple command, "Let there be light." This phrase, although poetic, resonates deeply with modern scientific studies on the origin of the cosmos. The Big Bang, as scientists call it, was an explosion of light and energy, the starting point of time and space. Interestingly, this scientific theory does not conflict with the biblical narrative. In fact, it seems to echo the same truths under a different language. The beginning of everything was not just a physical event, but the first act of a creator who established laws, forces, and equations that govern everything we know. In other words, science was born the moment God said, "Let there be." In Genesis, God creates in stages, establishing order, separating light from darkness, the heavens from the earth, water from dry land. Each stage follows a logical, almost mathematical sequence, reflecting a deliberate plan. Modern astrophysics points out that the universe operates with precise constants, such as the speed of light, gravitational force, and the charge of the electron, parameters that, if altered even slightly, would make life impossible. This leads us to a reflection: creation was not a chaotic act, but a divine engineering based on laws that science is still trying to understand. The Creator not only shaped matter, He also designed the invisible formulas that allow this matter to organize, grow, and transform. This same principle applies to life. Biology reveals mechanisms that are as complex as they are sublime: genetic codes, cellular reproduction, perfect symbioses. Many scientists marvel at the precision of DNA, as if it were a book written with 4 letters, A, T, C, G, encoding all the information of life. The psalmist already said, "You formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb." Modern science has only begun to decipher this divine knitting, confirming that there is no randomness in existence. Behind the cells, enzymes, and proteins, is the mind of a creator who chose to use logic to manifest His love and purpose. When we understand science as the fruit of God's order, we begin to see it not as an obstacle to faith, but as a path to admiration. Every scientific discovery becomes a window into the divine mind. Newton, Galileo, Kepler, and so many others saw science as a form of praise. For them, studying the stars, the movements of planets, was to uncover the secrets of a meticulous and majestic God. The Apostle Paul himself wrote that, "The invisible attributes of God, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through the things that have been made." This means that the more we understand nature, the closer we come to the work of the Creator. Therefore, if science explains the how, faith answers the why. Both walk side by side, pointing to a God who does not fear investigation, but encourages it. He is not a rival to science, but its author. Creation is not a separate event from the scientific universe, it is the origin of the laws that we now attempt to unravel. When we look at the starry sky, observe galaxies, or study the human body, we are not merely seeing matter and energy. We are seeing the fingerprints of God. And if miracles are simply the moments when God chooses to touch His own laws to reveal that He is still in control. Throughout the scriptures, miracles emerge as signs of divine power in action. However, when we look closer, we realize that many of these miracles occur within phenomena that, although extraordinary, can be interpreted through scientific lenses. This, however, does not diminish God's hand. In fact, it reveals an even greater beauty: the Creator who uses His own creation to manifest the supernatural. After all, It's no wonder that the author of natural laws also knows how to manipulate them with absolute precision to fulfill his will. Let's take the crossing of the Red Sea as an example. The Bible recounts that an east wind blew all night, separating the waters so that the people of Israel could walk across on dry land. Scientists point out that under certain geographical and meteorological conditions, very strong winds can actually push water masses and create temporary passages, a phenomenon known as wind setdown. A study published in the Journal of Physical Oceanography suggested that a wind of 100 km per hour for several hours, coming from a specific direction, could divide the waters in a manner similar to what is described in Exodus. But the true miracle is not the wind itself. It's the fact that it blew at the exact moment, in the exact place, with the exact intensity. Coincidence? Or providence? Another impressive example is the plague of frogs in Egypt. Today, we know that changes in water levels and abnormal temperatures can lead to massive migrations of amphibians. Science can explain the biology of frogs, but not the exact moment in which they appeared as a direct response to Pharaoh's refusal. When the natural pattern perfectly coincides with the spiritual plan, we have more than a phenomenon, we have a miracle operated through the laws created by God Himself. In the New Testament, Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding in Cana. Chemistry can explain the fermentation process, the reactions involving the conversion of sugar into alcohol, and the compounds that give the wine its flavor. But there was no time, no utensils, no physical processes. There was only a command: fill the jars with water. And within seconds, the wine was served. Science can explain the process, but not the timing. And this is precisely where the divine touch is revealed. God operates within the natural possibilities, but at the pace of the supernatural. When walking on water, Jesus challenges physics. No human body density can float on a liquid. Some have tried to suggest ice plates or hidden islands, but the rough waters and storm described disprove these hypotheses. Still, the question remains: even if we could construct a physical explanation, the purpose and spiritual impact would remain untouched. Miracles are not intended to impress scientists, but to reveal a God who intervenes, protects, and redirects the history of His people. The most fascinating thing is that by accepting that God can operate through natural laws, we do not diminish His power, we amplify it. After all, a painter who masters the colors on his palette can create masterpieces without having to break his paints, he simply uses them perfectly. So too, God, who created natural laws, can use them to make the extraordinary happen in a subtle, silent, and profoundly impactful way. Therefore, when we look at the miracles of the Bible through the eyes of science, we are not trying to rationalize them until they become trivial. We are recognizing that the God who created the logic of the universe also knows how to shape it perfectly. Miracles are the living testimony that science and faith are not in conflict but can meet, at the exact point where the natural touches the supernatural. The universe operates with such precise order that even the greatest scientists recognize an intelligent pattern in its functioning. From planetary orbits to the exact composition of the oxygen we breathe, everything seems calibrated with almost supernatural rigor. This harmony invites us to a thought-provoking reflection: what if the natural laws that govern the cosmos are, in fact, a direct reflection of God's creative mind? The Bible begins with a powerful statement: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Not only space and matter, but also time, gravity, cycles, and the invisible physics that hold everything in its proper place. Modern science reveals that the universe obeys complex mathematical laws and exact universal constants. But these laws did not create themselves. They presuppose an origin, and theology affirms that this origin is God Himself. Isaac Newton, one of the fathers of modern physics, saw his discoveries as a way to understand the mechanisms of God. For him, uncovering natural laws was contemplating the divine signature in the universe. And this view remains valid. Gravity, for example, keeps planets in their precise courses, and it may have been the same force used by God to create the separation between waters and land, between sky and sea. Science shows us the instrument, but it is faith that reveals the author. Photosynthesis in plants, the water cycle, cellular regeneration, everything follows a perfect rhythm, so well designed that it suggests intention. Nothing seems random. Even natural disasters, as tragic as they are in their manifestation, follow specific patterns and laws. God, in His sovereignty, is not limited by these laws. He created them and uses them as He wishes, whether to sustain life or to perform miracles. When we look at miracles through this lens, they become even more fascinating. They are not chaotic interruptions of natural order, but intentional insertions by God into His own system. It is like a composer who, in the middle of a perfect symphony, plays an unexpected note, not to break the harmony, but to intensify it. God does not violate natural laws. He directs them in such a way that they fulfill His will at decisive moments. This understanding changes our perspective on the world. Science ceases to be a threat to faith and becomes an ally in revealing divine grandeur. Every scientific discovery, every technological advance, is a fragment of God's infinite wisdom that we are allowed to grasp. And yet, the more we advance, the more we realize how much we still do not know. The vastness of the cosmos, the complexity of DNA, the mysteries of consciousness, everything points to a Creator who is beyond human comprehension. Therefore, to assert that natural laws reflect the power of God is not an attempt to spiritualize science, but to recognize its true origin. The natural is the continuous manifestation of the supernatural. Science is the study of what God has chosen to reveal. And the miracles? They are simply a reminder that behind every formula, every atom, and every law, there exists an eternal and sovereign will that governs all things with absolute perfection. Imagine a hungry crowd in a desolate place, at dusk. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And, in the face of scarcity, an abundance that defies logic, thousands are fed, and still, 12 baskets are left over. This is one of the most emblematic accounts in the New Testament, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. But what exactly happened there? Was it a complete supernatural intervention? Or could it have been a natural phenomenon, with a divine intention behind it? Some modern scholars try to suggest alternative hypotheses. Some say that, inspired by Jesus' example of generosity, the people present also took out their own food and shared it among themselves. Others attempt to analyze the text through symbolism, seeing in the miracle a lesson on community, not a literal multiplication. But even if plausible explanations are sought, there is something that science cannot measure, the spiritual impact of the event, the exact moment when faith becomes nourishment, and the common bread turns into a sign of something greater. And here lies the central point of this chapter. What defines a miracle is not the absence of natural causes, but the presence of divine purpose. When Jesus calms the storm with a word, the winds do not disappear by mere chance. Even if a natural calm were about to occur, it was Christ's command that determined it at that exact moment. If science could measure the barometer of the occasion, it might find signs of atmospheric stabilization, but it could never explain why this happened precisely when He ordered it. The same happens with the phenomenon of the Star of Bethlehem. Some astronomers suggest it was a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, producing an unusual brightness in the skies of Judea. Science can point to the celestial phenomenon, but it cannot explain why the wise men from the east interpreted it as a sign of the birth of a king. The synchronicity between the astronomical event and the spiritual revelation is what gives it a miraculous character. When we examine biblical miracles with an open mind to science, we are not weakening faith, we are strengthening it. We are recognizing that God is not in conflict with natural laws because He Himself created them. And if He wants to use them to fulfill His will, that does not make them any less miraculous. On the contrary, it reveals a God who masters creation so perfectly that He can use it with surgical precision to save, heal, guide, and transform. The key is understanding that the miracle is often the intersection between the natural and the supernatural, between the explainable and the inexplicable. There may be wind, there may be a star, there may be bread. But at the moment when God says, "Now," everything is transformed. It is not about magic or illusion, but about a divine action that chooses to operate through means that, at times, we can describe, but can never control. Thus, when asking if a miracle is a natural or divine phenomenon, we may be asking the wrong question. Because the true mystery lies not in the how, but in the who. And the answer is always the same: it was God. In the Gospels, Jesus touches the eyes of a blind man, and he regains his sight. He speaks to a paralytic, and he rises. He commands Lazarus, already buried for 4 days, to come out of the tomb, and he walks out. These accounts are as powerful as they are challenging. To the modern mind, accustomed to diagnoses, tests, and medical protocols, the question arises: could there be a scientific explanation behind such miracles? Or are we witnessing actions that transcend any known law of nature? Medicine, in its remarkable advancement, has witnessed cases that seemed irreversible, only to suddenly change course. There are reports of terminally ill patients who inexplicably recover. Science classifies these as spontaneous remissions. However, in each of these mysterious moments, many see the hand of God at work, operating where reason cannot reach. Jesus didn't just heal, he restored dignity, returned hope, and established a new reality that transcended any formula. Take, for example, the miracle of the woman who had been suffering from hemorrhaging for 12 years. No doctor had been able to cure her. But upon touching the hem of Jesus' garment, she was instantly healed. Modern science might try to explain the event through hypotheses such as extreme psychosomatic effects or neurobiological phenomena still unknown. But what remains indisputable is the timing and precision of the event. It wasn't a gradual process but an immediate healing, the exact moment when faith encountered divine power. And that is the true bridge between faith and science. Science seeks to understand how the universe works, while faith acknowledges the author of that work. When a miracle is observed through a scientific lens, it doesn't negate its divine nature, it only deepens the admiration for the complexity of the world that God created. If God is the creator of natural laws, why couldn't he use them or even suspend them at specific moments, according to his will? It is possible that, one day, science will advance to the point of explaining some miracles with new terms, new data, and new experiments. But that does not diminish their grandeur. What surprises us is not just what happened, but who made it happen. The act of turning water into wine, walking on the sea, raising the dead, these events are not meant to challenge science, but to reveal the character of a God who loves, heals, and cares about the details of human existence. The true harmony between science and faith does not lie in proving God through equations but in realizing that the universe, with all its laws and forces, is a stage where the Creator can act freely. A miracle is when the natural bows to the supernatural, and the impossible becomes a testimony. Therefore, the miracles of the New Testament are not an affront to reason but a call to mystery. They are reminders that, while we can measure heartbeats, we cannot measure faith. We can analyze cells, but we cannot touch the spirit. And it is in this invisible space between the measurable and the eternal that God acts, with power, with love, with precision. Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has sought to understand the mysteries of the universe. Curiosity, a gift granted by God, has driven us to study the stars, decipher the winds, and comprehend the workings of the human body. We've developed microscopes, telescopes, and supercomputers. We've named cells, molecules, and galaxies. Yet, despite such advancement, we still find ourselves perplexed by fundamental questions. What is consciousness? What happens after death? How do we explain love, faith, forgiveness? Science is undoubtedly one of the most powerful tools ever given to humanity. It reveals the order behind chaos, shows the precision with which the universe was designed, and indirectly proves that there is intelligence behind creation. But science works with observable evidence, with that which can be repeated, measured, and verified. And what is divine, by definition, transcends such limits. God does not fit into a laboratory. His ways do not follow formulas. His miracles do not repeat for convenience, they manifest according to his sovereign will. When we attempt to reduce God to equations or fit him into theories, we risk losing the sacred awe. There is an abyss between understanding how a cell functions and comprehending the purpose of life. Science can explain how rain forms, but it cannot explain why the farmer prays with gratitude when it falls. It can describe the composition of light, but not the emotion of seeing the sunrise. It can study the brain, but it will never touch the soul. Faith, in turn, does not despise science. It observes it with admiration, for it recognizes there the reflection of the creative mind. But it also understands that there is an insurmountable divide between the finite and the infinite. The Apostle Paul already said, "Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face," 1 Corinthians 13 verse 12. Science sees fragments of the mirror. God is the craftsman who shaped it. It is precisely in this human limitation that faith finds its value. To believe is an act that requires humility, the recognition that not everything needs to be understood to be true. That not everything invisible is non-existent. That there is a higher wisdom at work beyond our comprehension. Science can take us to the door of the miracle, but only faith allows us to cross it. Therefore, when reflecting on miracles, we should not seek them only as phenomena to be analyzed, but as invitations to contemplation. Every inexplicable healing, every supernatural event, every sign in the heavens is not a break from natural laws, but a demonstration that there is a higher law, governed not by human logic, but by the will of a sovereign God. And so, we end this journey with one certainty: the more science advances, the more it points to the grandeur of the Creator. And the more we seek to understand the mysteries of life, the more we are led to reverence, to silence, to worship. Because in the end, science explains the how. But only God reveals the why. Even when science tries to decipher miracles, the mystery of God remains unattainable. Perhaps the winds, the waters, and the natural laws obey because they know the voice of the Creator. In the end, the true question is not, how was it possible, but, who is behind it? Because science can explain the signs, but only faith reveals the author.